You won't scare me, Reed.
I don't need to scare you.
Her voice cracked across the parking lot like a whip. You're violating the line spacing again, Mr. Ward. That was the first thing Darla Whitlock said to me while my son lay motionless on the asphalt. She held the violation notice like a weapon, chin lifted, acting as if she'd caught a criminal instead of witnessing a child in danger. The board chair didn't even glance at Mason. She just shoved the paper into my chest, smirking as if she'd won something, but she wasn't prepared for what came out of my mouth. You might want to rethink that, I told her quietly, because every angle of this lot is my territory. Her smile faltered, just a twitch, but enough. And if you've ever felt that pulse of adrenaline when standing up to someone who abuses their power, stay close and hit subscribe right now. She tried to hand me a second citation, but I pushed it gently back toward her. I know every blind spot in this place, I said. I train the officers who track moving targets for a living. Her eyes widened just slightly, a flicker. She didn't know that part about me, and she sure didn't know everything about my family either. I knelt beside Mason, brushing dirt from his cheek. His skin felt cold. His breathing was shallow. The last thing he'd said before collapsing echoed through my skull. Dad. It hurts. That sentence is what anchored me, what cracked something in my chest that would never fully heal. The enforcer in crimson was still hovering, arms crossed, waiting for me to acknowledge her authority. Your son tripped, she said sharply. Caleb barely touched him. That lie sent heat through me, a flash of white behind my eyes. I didn't shout, I didn't break. I simply stood slowly, lifting my son into my arms, feeling the limpness that no father should ever feel from his child. You touched evidence today, I told her, without gloves, without caution, without a thought. Her expression stiffened. She hadn't realized she'd stepped into the scene first, before anyone else, smearing her fingerprints across the railing. The clipboard queen flinched when I met her eyes. This isn't going to go the way you think it will, I said. Not for you, and not for him. She laughed once, sharp, brittle. You're overreacting. You always do. Funny, she'd never seen me react at all. I carried Mason toward the car, the weight of him heavier with every step. I opened the door, laid him across the back seat, and buckled him carefully, hands trembling only when they were out of her sight. I took one last look at the tyrant in heels, her arms folded, her posture stiff with the confidence of someone convinced she was untouchable. You should go to the hospital, she said, tone flat, but don't blame my son for your child's clumsiness. That sentence is when everything inside me shifted. She didn't know my background, she didn't know my training, and she definitely didn't know my entire family were SWAT snipers, people who lived by precision, awareness, and truth. I closed the car door gently, turned to her, and said, You just made this personal. Her smirk returned. Good. I like personal. She had no idea what she'd awakened. As I drove out of the lot, Mason's head resting against the seat, I whispered, I'll get justice, son, no matter what it takes. Because this wasn't just a parking spot. This was the line she crossed. I didn't sleep that night, not even when the hospital's hallway lights dimmed and the machines beside Mason settled into their steady, mechanical rhythm. I sat near his bed, elbows on my knees, fingers pressed against my mouth. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him falling, heard the thud of his head hitting the pavement. And every time, I saw Darla Whitlock standing there with that smug, cold expression, waving her violation slip like a victory flag. The doctor came in around dawn, voice gentle but weighted. He's stable, she said, but he's not waking yet. We just have to monitor. I nodded, because nodding is all you can do when you're trying to keep grief from boiling over. I tucked Mason's small hand under my thumb, rubbing circles on the back of it because it made me feel like I could still reach him somehow. By noon, I forced myself to step outside for air. The hospital courtyard was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. I needed the space, needed to think, needed to plan. That's when I saw her, leaning against a wall near the entrance, arms crossed, red blazer catching the sunlight like she wanted to be seen. The board chair had followed me to the hospital. Are you stalking me now? I asked, stopping a few feet away. She pushed off the wall, brushing invisible dust from her lapel. I'm here because I heard you were making accusations to neighbors. I won't have you slandering my family. Slandering? I stepped closer. Your son put mine in a coma, Darla. Her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite a grimace. Boy's rough house. It happens. My voice turned to gravel. This wasn't rough housing. She looked away, adjusting her blazer like the gesture might shield her. You're emotional, understandably. But you can't take this out on my son. He didn't mean to harm yours. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said. Her eyes snapped back to mine, narrowed. If you escalate this, Ethan, I can make things very complicated for you. There it was, the real voice. The enforcer in crimson speaking through her facade. I crossed my arms. Complicated how? She stepped closer, lowering her voice. HOA violations can pile up quickly. Property-related issues, yard discrepancies, noise complaints. She leaned in. You'd be surprised how much authority I have. I stared at her, letting the silence do the cutting. She didn't know it yet, but every threat she threw out only exposed the truth she was trying to bury. You're threatening me while my son is unconscious upstairs, I said. She tilted her head, lips tight. I'm advising you. A father should know when to let things go. And those words, were the moment I realized this wasn't incompetence or denial. It was a cover-up, clean, deliberate, calculated. You tampered with something, I said softly. You're too defensive, too rehearsed. Her jaw clenched, just a fraction, but enough to confirm it. Don't start imagining conspiracies, she snapped. The cameras malfunctioned. It happens. And you just happened to be standing there first? I was walking the property, she lied too quickly. You were already there, I said, before I even saw Mason. The clipboard queen tensed, her fingers curling around her folder. You're grasping. No, I replied. I'm seeing clearly. She exhaled sharply and took a step back, the panic flashing across her face before she smothered it. Ethan, you're in pain. You're looking for someone to blame. I'm looking for truth, I said, and truth doesn't hide behind policy. Something changed in her eyes then, fear or anger, or the moment a liar hears footsteps behind them. You won't win this, she whispered. You already lost, I said. You just don't know it yet. She stiffened, heels clicking sharply as she turned and walked toward her car. As she opened the door, she paused and looked back. The parking lot lights flickered overhead, casting her in a fractured glow. There are rules in our community, she said. Don't make yourself the exception. She drove off. I stood in the silence she left behind, the truth settling in my bones like a bitter weight. The tyrant in heels wasn't just corrupt. She was scared, and fear makes people sloppy. As I walked back inside, a thought hit me like a punch. If she followed me here, what else was she hiding? I looked at Mason through the glass of his room, his small chest rising mechanically, and whispered, I'll uncover everything. For you. I returned to Mason's room with a different kind of weight sitting on my shoulders. Not grief this time, but certainty. Darla Whitlock hadn't shown up at that hospital because she cared. She showed up because she was trying to manage a narrative that was about to slip out of her white-knuckle grip. I closed the door softly behind me, watching my son's chest rise and fall beneath the hospital blankets. Machines beeped steadily, each sound carving a deeper promise into my chest. That's when I noticed someone standing just outside the glass panel, a figure partially turned away, shoulders tense, hands shifting nervously at his sides. Jordan Hale, the HOA maintenance supervisor, the man who handled the camera system, the man who always kept to himself, stood frozen like someone debating whether to step forward or run. I stepped into the hallway. Jordan? He flinched, just slightly, and turned toward me with the expression of someone trying to swallow panic before it reached his eyes. Hey, Ethan, he murmured, voice uneven. You okay? I asked, leaning beside him. He swallowed hard. I heard about Mason. I'm really sorry. His body language said more than the words ever could. Shoulders drawn up, foot shifting, eyes flicking side to side. He wasn't just worried. He was terrified. You're not here by accident, I said quietly. He exhaled shakily. I shouldn't even be standing here. Darla said. He cut himself off, lips pressing shut instantly, as if he'd revealed a crime. My chest tightened. Darla said what? Jordan stared at the floor, voice low. Forget it. I shouldn't have come. He started to walk away, and instinctively I reached out, not grabbing him, just gently stopping his movement. You showed up because your conscience dragged you here, I told him. You saw something, didn't you? His shoulders tensed so sharply it looked painful. Please, Ethan, don't make me talk here. My pulse slowed, controlled, tactical. Walk with me, I said, turning toward the end of the hallway where no nurses lingered. He hesitated before following, every step revealing more of his fear. When we reached a quiet alcove near the vending machines, Jordan leaned against the wall, covering his face with both hands. I didn't mean for any of this, he whispered. I never wanted a kid hurt. My breath caught. There it was, the fracture, the beginning of truth. But the moment he lowered his hands, his eyes darted to the hallway entrance, checking for anyone, checking for her. You're scared of Darla, I said. He didn't deny it. His silence said everything. The board chair threatened you? I pressed. He let out a bitter laugh, small, humorless. Threatened? Ethan, she owns the board. She controls every complaint, every decision, every job in that community. You cross her, you lose everything. His hands shook. And I need that job. You need your integrity more, I said softly. He winced as if the words struck him physically. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You saw what happened. You know Mason didn't fall. His breath stuttered. No, he didn't. His voice cracked. Caleb shoved him, hard. My fist tightened. The hallway walls felt colder. And the camera? I asked quietly. Jordan's face contorted. Fear, guilt, shame, all fighting for space. She told me to reset it early that morning, told me it was glitching. I thought it was a routine fix, but after the incident, she said to mark the system as non-operational. She looked me in the eyes and said if I didn't, she'd make sure I couldn't afford to live in Silver Ridge ever again. The enforcer in crimson had crafted her lie with precision. Jordan covered his face again. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't think it would matter. I didn't think... He trailed off, shaking. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You didn't do this to my son, Jordan. You're not the villain here. He looked up, eyes rimmed red. Then why does it feel like I am? Because you're carrying the truth alone, I said. And that truth is heavy. He exhaled shakily again. If I talk, she'll ruin me. If you stay silent, I said, nodding toward Mason's room, she'll do much worse. Jordan followed my gaze, throat tightening. In that moment, a single trembling second, I saw the shift. The moment when a man decides whether to stay buried under fear or claw his way toward what's right. He whispered, I need time. You'll get it, I said. But eventually, you'll have to choose. Jordan walked away slowly, shoulders still trembling, but something new in his step, something like resolve. I stood there watching him disappear around the corner, knowing one thing with absolute certainty. Darla Whitlock's lies were starting to crack, and when they finally shattered, she wouldn't be able to sweep up the pieces. The next morning, the hospital felt different, tense, charged, as if the air itself knew something was shifting beneath the polished floors. I'd barely slept 40 minutes, but adrenaline forced me upright, pacing the hallway outside Mason's room. Jordan's confession echoed relentlessly in my head. He hadn't said everything, but he'd said enough to confirm the cracks in Darla Whitlock's carefully constructed wall. By the time I stepped outside to get fresh air, the storm had already arrived. Her Mercedes was parked illegally right in the hospital's fire lane. Of course it was. The board chair stepped out in a new blazer, deep maroon, as if the color itself was a warning. She walked straight toward me, heels striking the concrete with military precision. You went to the neighbors last night, she said without greeting, asking questions. No, I corrected. They came to me. Her jaw tightened. You're creating chaos, Ethan. Chaos already exists, I said. Your son made sure of that. She took a long breath, smoothing her blazer like she was preparing for a photo shoot instead of facing the consequences of a child in a coma. You're emotional, she said again, the same line, delivered with the same patronizing tilt of her head. This is why we have rules, order, process. You weaponize those rules, I replied. You bend them, twist them, bury truth under them. You think a citation is a shield? That HOA authority is armor? Her eyes flashed like a blade catching sunlight. Watch your tone. No, I said calmly. Watch your lies. That cracked her composure. You think you know more than you do, she whispered, stepping closer. You're clinging to rumors, misunderstandings. And camera logs, I added. Don't forget those. There, the flicker. Her eyes darted for a millisecond. Fear, guilt, something ugly bubbling just beneath her controlled surface. You don't have access to those, she snapped too quickly. You're right, I said. I don't. Her shoulders eased. But someone does. Her breath halted. The enforcer in crimson facade shattered. Panic rushed into its place. She looked around the parking lot, as if checking whether anyone was watching her unravel. I don't know what you think Jordan told you, she said tightly, but he's unreliable. A maintenance worker, hardly someone whose word holds weight. That the best you can do? I asked. Discredit the man who keeps the entire community running because he's not sitting on your precious board? Her lips trembled with suppressed rage. Jordan knows his position. He knows loyalty. Loyalty? I stepped forward. Or fear? Her breathing quickened. You're making a mistake, she said quietly. No, I answered. I'm correcting one. Her mouth opened, ready to strike, but she froze as the hospital's side door swung open. 2 nurses stepped out, pushing a cart. One glanced at us cautiously, sensing tension. The sight of uniformed medical staff made Darla straighten her spine and mask her panic with the shallow poise of someone who'd practiced lying more than telling the truth. You're unstable, Ethan, she said loudly enough for the nurses to hear. Threatening me won't bring your son back. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Threatening you? I asked quietly. Darla, if I wanted to intimidate you, you'd already know. The clipboard queen blinked at me, absorbing the implication. The reality that I wasn't some frazzled homeowner, but a man who'd trained people to assess danger in fractions of a second. Her inhale was sharp. You're not as powerful as you think, she whispered. And you're not as untouchable as you pretend, I replied. She stepped back, her heels clicking unevenly now, betraying the tremor in her stance. You'll lose everything if you push this, she said. Your house, your reputation, your peace. The board will not protect you. The board shouldn't protect me, I said, but it shouldn't protect corruption either. Her face flushed, a crack of rage across porcelain. This conversation never happened, she hissed. It happened, I said, and you're unraveling. Before she could reply, my phone buzzed. A message from Brooks. Call me ASAP, county rep wants to meet. Perfect timing. I lowered my phone slowly, meeting her eyes. Your storm's coming, Darla. She scoffed, but fear pulsed behind her pupils. She wasn't the tyrant in heels anymore. She was a cornered one. As she turned away and practically fled to her car, I felt the shift fully settle. This wasn't just an HOA problem anymore. It wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. It was becoming an official investigation. And she knew it. I called Brooks the moment Darla's car disappeared around the corner. His voice came through hard and direct. Good. You're up. County Investigator Ramirez wants to speak with you. She's already reviewing the preliminary hospital report. Where? I asked. Public Safety Annex, 3rd floor. Perfect. Neutral ground. A place where Darla Whitlock's HOA influence meant nothing. I headed back inside to check on Mason. The soft, rhythmic beeping of his monitors hit me right in the chest. I squeezed his hand gently, making a silent promise I'd keep even if it cost me everything. Then I left for the annex. The Public Safety Annex was a stark, glass-walled building with polished floors and a constant hum of electronics. When I entered, Investigator Ramirez, a woman with sharp eyes and a clipped tone, motioned me into a conference room. Mr. Ward, she said, I've reviewed the initial statements and medical notes. I understand your son's injuries aren't consistent with a simple fall. That's because it wasn't one, I said. Her pen hovered above her pad. You mentioned possible camera interference. Not possible, I corrected. Intentional. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Explain. I took a breath. This was the moment my victory strategy, the burst 5, outside authority intervention, moved into motion. Your office oversees community safety compliance, I said, pulling up a digital screenshot I'd taken the previous night. And this, I rotated my phone so she could see the reflective damage marks around the camera housing, is the signature of a forced reset. Ramirez frowned. Who maintains the cameras? The HOA maintenance supervisor, I said. Jordan Hale. And you think he tampered with it? No, I said quietly. I think the board chair ordered him to. Her eyebrow lifted. Darla Whitlock? The same. Ramirez leaned back, thinking. And what makes you believe that? Because she followed me to the hospital, I said. She tried to control the narrative. She tried to silence conversations between neighbors. And she slipped when I mentioned the cameras. The investigator tapped her pen. Did she directly acknowledge knowledge of the malfunction? Not verbally, I said. But her reaction wasn't the reaction of someone surprised. I paused. It was the reaction of someone exposed. Ramirez nodded slowly, filing it away. And the injuries? I handed her my son's medical summary. Blunt force trauma from a shove. Height differential of approximately 12 to 16 inches. I met her gaze. That matches one person. Caleb. Whitlock. Silence thickened between us. Then Ramirez closed the file. Mr. Ward, this is enough to begin formal inquiry. A pulse of relief surged through me. Sharp, almost painful. But before we move forward, she added, I need corroboration. Anyone else who can confirm tampering, suspicious behavior, or hostile board actions. Jordan, the conflicted witness. He wasn't ready yet, but he would be. I'll get you someone, I said, her eyes sharpened. Soon? Very. She nodded. Good, because if camera tampering occurred, the county takes that seriously. Very seriously. When I walked out of the annex, sunlight cut across the pavement like a blade. I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from unknown numbers. 1 voicemail, 1 HOA email notification. I played the voicemail. Mr. Ward, this is Darla. Her voice shook, not with fear, but with controlled fury. I heard you've been making accusations. You need to stop, now, before things get difficult. There she was, the enforcer in crimson slipping out of her polished facade. Then came the email. 3 violation notices, filed within the last hour. I opened the first. Violation. Unauthorized contact with HOA employees. Next. Violation. Disorderly conduct on HOA premises. And finally, violation. Misuse of community parking lines. My laugh came out sharp. Misuse of lines? After everything? She was scrambling, weakening, desperate. I turned the phone screen off and stared across the parking lot, watching families walk by, unaware they were living in a community run by someone capable of burying anything that threatened her image. I thought of Jordan's shaking hands, Darla's trembling voice, Ramirez's tightening expression as she realized this wasn't a simple neighborhood dispute. This was corruption, systemic, calculated, personal. A gust of wind swept across the lot, carrying the faint smell of cut grass from the nearby fields. It grounded me. I whispered, "This is only the beginning," because now the county was involved. The evidence was aligning, the lies were unraveling, and Darla Whitlock was running out of time. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the day had shifted into that uneasy stillness right before a storm breaks. Quiet skies, tense air, every shadow feeling sharper. I stepped out of my truck and scanned the cul-de-sac automatically, instincts kicking in. Years of tactical training do that to you. You see things other people overlook, and today, one thing stood out instantly. Darla Whitlock's SUV was parked at the edge of my property line. Her engine was off. Her windows were tinted. But I could see her silhouette, perfect posture, arms folded, staring directly at my house like she was measuring the best angle of attack. "The board chair doesn't rest," I muttered under my breath. I walked toward my front porch, refusing to give her the attention she was so desperately fishing for. But before I made it to the door, her SUV door opened and heels clicked across the pavement. Here she comes. The enforcer in crimson, dressed in another sharp blazer, this one a deep steel gray, approached me like she was walking into a board meeting she refused to lose. "We need to talk," she said. No, I answered, unlocking my door. You need to stop. She stepped in front of me, blocking the entrance. You met with the county today. I kept my face still. You're monitoring my movements now? You're causing problems, she snapped. Serious ones. I crossed my arms. My son is in a coma because of your son. I'm not the problem here. Her eyes flickered, not with remorse, but with calculation. Ethan, listen to me. You're pushing this too far. You're involving authorities who don't understand our community or how we function. That's exactly why they're involved, I said, her jaw clenched. What did that investigator tell you? That's between me and them. The clipboard queen stepped closer, lowering her voice. If you keep escalating this, I will have no choice but to take more formal action. I almost laughed. More formal than 3 violations you filed in under an hour? Her nostrils flared. You shouldn't antagonize me. I stepped past her and opened my door. You shouldn't underestimate me. But before I could step inside, her voice dropped to a quieter, darker tone, one that made even the air feel colder. You're forgetting something, Ethan, she said. You live under my rules. I turned back slowly. Not for long. The tyrant in heels stiffened. What does that mean? It means the people you're scaring, the staff you're threatening, the witnesses you're cornering. I paused. They're breaking. Something twitched across her face. Jordan talked to you, didn't he? Her words landed like a confession. I held her gaze without responding. She stepped closer, gripping her folders so tightly her knuckles turned white. He's unstable. He's lying. He's trying to keep his job. He's terrified of you. He should be, she whispered. That single sentence told me everything I needed to know. Darla was losing control, and fear was making her reckless. Go home, I said firmly. Walk away before you bury yourself deeper. She blinked, stunned by the shift in power. You're making threats now? No, I said. I'm making predictions. Her breathing quickened. She stared at me, trying to read a man she had never taken the time to understand. She didn't know the things I'd seen. She didn't know the things I'd trained others to see. And she definitely didn't know the line I had crossed inside the moment Mason collapsed in my arms. I shut the door on her mid-glare. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked to the kitchen, poured water, and checked my phone. One new message from Jordan. We need to talk. Urgent. My pulse sharpened. I replied instantly. Where? A moment later, his response came. Behind the maintenance shed, no cameras there. Of course there weren't. I grabbed my jacket and headed toward the back door. But before stepping outside, I glanced through the window. Darla Whitlock was still in her SUV, still watching, still planning, still losing. And she knew it. I whispered to myself as I walked into the fading light. This ends tonight. Because the stakes had shifted. This wasn't just discovery anymore. This was commitment. This was war. Jordan was already pacing when I reached the back of the maintenance shed. Shoulders tight, breath shallow, eyes flicking toward every shadow like he expected Darla Whitlock herself to materialize from the darkness. The shed light flickered overhead, casting quick, nervous strokes of yellow across his face. He wasn't just scared. He was unraveling. Ethan, thank God you came, he whispered, wringing his hands hard enough to redden the skin. What happened? I asked, scanning the tree line. Old instincts never die. Jordan swallowed, voice cracking. She knows. That landed heavy. Knows what? That I talked to you. That I'm not keeping quiet anymore. Of course she did. The board chair always sniffed out any crack in loyalty like a predator smelling blood. I stepped closer. Tell me everything, now. He nodded rapidly, almost in relief. I can't do this anymore. I can't live in fear of her. I can't keep helping her destroy people. His body language said it all. Darting eyes, trembling fingers, weight shifting like he was ready to run. The perfect picture of a conflicted witness finally reaching his breaking point. She cornered me this morning, he said. The enforcer in crimson actually waited outside my place. She said she knew I'd been chatting where I shouldn't. Her words. I clenched my jaw. The clipboard queen didn't just abuse authority, she weaponized it. And then, Jordan continued, she told me she'd ruin my record if I didn't stay loyal. Said nobody would hire me anywhere in the county again. The tyrant in heels. Yes, that fit her perfectly. I held Jordan's shoulder. You're doing the right thing. Start from the beginning. He took a shaky breath. Okay, first, what happened to your son wasn't an accident. I didn't move, didn't blink. Go on. He was targeted. My pulse hit my ears in a hard, steady thud. Jordan pushed his hands through his hair. Her son, Cole, he's been bragging for weeks, saying his mom, the officer of rules, told him your family needed to fall in line. He said you were making the board look weak. I stepped closer. And she encouraged him? Jordan nodded miserably. She told him that some people only learn through consequences. A cold, murderous stillness washed through my chest. And there's more, he whispered. Cole said he'd make sure your boy didn't show his face around here again. He meant it, Ethan. He meant every word. I breathed slowly, deliberately. My hands curled without thinking. She's been covering for him for months, Jordan continued. Every complaint, every fight, every time neighbors report him bullying kids, she deletes the reports, says it's immature exaggeration. It's a pattern, I said, not an isolated incident. Yes, Jordan said, exhaling shakily. And I've been helping her hide it, because I needed the job, because she threatened me. There it was. The confession, part 7, required. He stared at the ground like he couldn't face himself. But seeing your son in that hospital, I couldn't sleep. Not anymore. You're doing the right thing, I repeated, and you're not alone. Jordan's shoulders slumped, the relief visible. There's something else. My chest tightened. What? He looked up, eyes wet with fear. Tomorrow night, she's planning something, a meeting, a private one. She only invited her allies. She's going to push a motion to expel you from the community. Expulsion, a nuclear option. She thinks if she forces you out, Jordan said, it'll silence you and protect her son. I felt the shift inside me, stillness turning sharp. But, Jordan added, a spark finally forming in his voice, that's where you can win. I overheard her talking on the phone. The HOA's incorporation wasn't properly completed when she took power. The election wasn't legal. A slow, growing clarity settled in the center of my mind. Legal technicality. The route to dismantling everything she built. Jordan swallowed. I can show you the inconsistencies, the procedural violations. You just have to act fast. I nodded once. I will. He pulled a small notebook from his jacket, hands shaking. These are dates, events, witness accounts, all things she tried to bury. They prove misuse of authority. I took it, and for the first time since Mason hit the ground, hope didn't feel like an enemy. You understand what this means, Ethan? Jordan whispered. I looked past him, toward the street where Darla Whitlock lived, where her light still burned like a warning. It means, I said quietly, she's about to lose everything. Jordan's confession was still echoing through my head as I stepped out from behind the maintenance shed and crossed toward my truck. The night air felt colder now, sharper, like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. Street lamps hummed their soft electric whine, pale circles of light blinking across pavement that had seen far too much violence already. Mason should have been running on this street, laughing, skidding his little sneakers across gravel the way he always did. Instead, he was in a coma, and Darla, Whitlock, the very woman sworn to protect community harmony, had orchestrated every step that led him there. I gripped the truck door to steady myself, breath slow and deliberate. I couldn't afford to break. Not yet. Not until every piece of her empire was pulled out by the roots. The notebook Jordan handed me was tucked securely in my jacket. Each line inside it was a thread that, when pulled, would unravel the entire board's authority. Legal violations, abuse of power, a fraudulent election, suppressed reports, tampering with records, a history of intimidation, a weapon sharper than anything my family carried in the field, and tonight, for the first time, I had an advantage the clipboard queen never expected. I slid into the truck and pulled out my phone, opening the secure channel my brothers and I shared. Nothing fancy, just 3 men raised under the same roof with the same code. Protect your own. I typed fast. Need you here tomorrow night. Bring eyes, bring ears, quiet only. Almost immediately, 3 dots appeared, then another, then they disappeared. Then came the reply from North, my oldest brother. On standby. What's the op? I typed, HOA board chair, illegal election, covering for her son. Mason targeted. A pause, then, she did this? I stared at the glowing screen. Yes. Seconds later, we'll be there. All of us. I exhaled slowly, watching the message fade into the darkened screen. Reinforcements would arrive at dawn, trained observers, tactical minds, SWAT-level precision. My family didn't bring violence unless violence came first, but they understood pressure, strategy, angles, and exposure better than anyone alive. The tyrant in heels wouldn't see this kind of retaliation coming, not because it was brutal, but because it was legal, meticulous, and airtight. Exactly the kind of threat she couldn't fight. I drove straight to the municipal building, where the HOA bylaws were required to be publicly accessible, something the officer of rules assumed no resident ever bothered to check. The parking lot was nearly empty, just 2 staff vehicles left under the flickering lights. I headed inside, the scent of old paper and disinfectant hitting me like a wall. I knew the law, I knew the structure, I knew where to look. Years of helping my brother prep for administrative oversight hearings had taught me exactly how HOAs were supposed to be formed, and more importantly, how often they cut corners. I made my way to the public terminal and logged in. The databases hummed to life. Within minutes I found it, the HOA's incorporation papers, filed, stamped, signed, but missing something critical, a certified verification of member vote. It wasn't just a small oversight, it was the foundation crumbling. Without that verification, Darla Whitlock had zero legal authority to hold a board position, enact rules, issue fines, or threaten any resident. And every decision she'd made, even every punishment, every violation, every proceeding was legally void. The enforcer in Crimson didn't just abuse the system. She never had a system to begin with. My heart beat slow and controlled as I cross-checked dates, signatures, and procedural requirements. Then I compared them to Jordan's notebook, his detailed notes on interactions, meetings, and cover-ups. The pieces fit perfectly, too perfectly. I wasn't just preparing a defense anymore. I was building a demolition blueprint. By the time I left the municipal building, midnight was sliding across the sky. A few porch lights flickered on as sprinklers began clicking across trimmed lawns, mist rising like low fog. The clipboard Queen's house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, glowing with that unmistakable cold white security lighting she'd forced everyone else to install. She thought it made her untouchable, but lights didn't protect her now. Truth did, and truth was already moving, quiet, deliberate, and unstoppable. Tomorrow night, her private ally-only meeting wouldn't unfold the way she dreamed. Her circle wouldn't shield her. Her title wouldn't save her. Her lies wouldn't stay buried, not when every step of her fraud was about to be exposed. Not when my brothers were on their way. Not when Mason still lay silent in that hospital bed. And not when a father finally had the means, and the resolve, to bring the entire board chair's empire crashing down. The next evening, the neighborhood felt different, like the air itself knew something was coming. Porch lights glowed a little too bright. Dogs barked at shadows that weren't moving. Even the wind carried a wary tension, skimming across the pavement where Mason used to race his scooter. I pulled into the cul-de-sac just before 9. My brothers were already here, their cars parked casually along the curb like any other visitor. To anyone watching, it looked harmless, routine, ordinary, but nothing about tonight was ordinary. North stepped out first, lean, steady, eyes scanning rooftops and sight lines without a word. East followed, always calm, always observant, and Ridge, youngest of us, fell in beside me, checking over his shoulder with a practice sweep. We weren't armed, we didn't need to be. We brought something far more dangerous to the clipboard queen: truth, timing, and ironclad procedure. Meetings at 9:30? North asked quietly. Yeah, I said. Darla Whitlock kept it invite only, her inner circle only. She really thinks she's untouchable. She's about to learn otherwise, Ridge muttered. Lights flicked on inside the HOA clubhouse across the greenbelt. Cars filed in, her allies, her loyalists, the board members she kept in line through favors or fear. I recognized some of them, the rule repeaters, the whisper agents, the ones who'd glare at me when I walked by without a lawn violation they could enforce. The enforcer in crimson stood near the door, wearing her trademark sharp red blazer, like armor. Her posture, chin high, shoulders back, broadcasted a lie she'd believed for years. I control this neighborhood. Tonight, that illusion ends. We moved along the sidewalk in silence, sticking to the tree line. My brothers weren't here to intimidate, just to observe, gather angles, and ensure no one did something stupid on her behalf. SWAT training made them walking guardians, calm, calculated, and impossible to shake. As we approached the clubhouse, I spotted someone standing alone near the hydrangea bushes, Jordan, the conflicted witness. The kid looked torn apart inside, shoulders tense, hands wringing, eyes flicking between me and the entrance like he couldn't decide which direction would destroy him faster. I stepped closer. "You don't have to go in there." He swallowed hard. She told me if I didn't show up, she'd report me for insubordination. Residents lose jobs over that stuff sometimes. I can't afford. "You're not losing anything tonight," I said softly. "Not with what you've given me. You're the reason this ends." Jordan's throat bobbed. "Are you sure it's going to work?" I nodded. "Absolutely." Behind us, the tyrant in heels strutted inside, barking instructions like a general before battle. She never saw us in the shadows, never suspected her downfall was already standing behind the shrubs. She forced everyone to prune at a precise height. 9:30 hit, doors closed, windows glowed. Voices buzzed inside, some loud, some nervous, some blindly loyal. My brothers positioned themselves strategically around the perimeter, eyes sharp, angles memorized. Anyone who tried to slip out or hide something would be seen. I pulled the folder from under my arm, the printed municipal findings, the legal inconsistencies, the missing verification that turned every one of her rulings into dust. Then I pulled out the small notebook Jordan had given me, her own patterns, her decisions, her threats, her cover-ups, a roadmap to her collapse. "All right," I whispered, "let's end it." I stepped out of the shadows and walked straight toward the clubhouse door. My heartbeat was steady, my steps measured. No anger, just purpose. I pushed open the door. Conversation stopped instantly. Every head turned. There she was, Darla Whitlock, front and center, arms crossed, lips curled like she'd expected this moment and believed she'd win it. Behind her stood the officer of rules, clutching a stack of forged violation papers. To her right, the board chair allies stiffened, eyes darting between me and the exit. I didn't shout, I didn't stumble, I simply held up the folder. "This meeting," I said, voice steady, "is illegal." Gasps rippled across the room. Her face tightened. "Excuse me?" "This board," I continued, "was never lawfully elected. These filings prove it. This notebook," I lifted the second item, "confirms you knew it." A tremor flickered across her expression, fear she tried desperately to smother. "You have no authority," I finished. "Not over this neighborhood, not over anyone. And tonight, everyone here is about to find out." Behind me, my brothers stepped into view, not threatening, not moving, just present, just watching, just enough to make sure no one lied their way out of what was coming. For the first time since Mason fell, I saw it, Darla Whitlock breaking, and it was only the beginning. The moment those words left my mouth, "This meeting is illegal," the entire clubhouse seemed to freeze. Not one whisper, not one cough. Even the fluorescent lights overhead felt like they dimmed under the weight of it. And across the room, Darla Whitlock stood like a statue carved out of entitlement and panic. Her lips trembled before she caught them with her teeth. The clipboard queen didn't blink. The enforcer in crimson didn't breathe. She just stared at me like I'd ripped the ground out from beneath her stiletto heels. Behind her, the officer of rules clutched his stack of violation papers so tight they crinkled. The rest of the board shifted in their seats, suddenly aware they might be witnesses to something they never signed up for. I stepped forward slowly, laying the municipal documents on the long oak table. These filings are incomplete. No verified election, no certified member vote, no resident authorization for board authority. Every decision you've made, I said, looking straight at the tyrant in heels, is void. Darla's voice cracked before she steadied it. That's nonsense. You don't understand the legal. I understand perfectly, I cut in, calm, steady, unshakable. My brother oversees tactical operations that require absolute procedural accuracy, and I use the same standards he does to check your filings. A murmur spread across the room like a slow-moving storm. Some board members looked at her, some looked at me. Some looked at the glowing documents like they were radioactive. North stepped beside me, not threatening, just present. His arms crossed, eyes locked on every exit. East leaned against the wall, silent as stone. Ridge stood near the front desk, hands relaxed, but posture fully alert. They didn't have to say a word. Their presence spoke volumes. The board chair's bravado cracked for the first time. Her fingers twitched as she grabbed for her folder. This community runs because of me. I've kept order. I've maintained standards. Without me, this neighborhood would fall apart. No, I said softly. Without you, this neighborhood will finally breathe. She slammed her folder shut. You have no authority to speak here. I opened Jordan's notebook and tapped a page. Your own operations supervisor disagrees. Her eyes darted to the door, just for a second, a tell, a fear she'd never meant to show. Jordan, standing behind the hydrangea bushes earlier, had carried that fear on his shoulders for years. A woman seated near the front, usually quiet, always agreeable, raised her hand halfway. Is this true? None of us actually voted you in? Silence. Darla inhaled sharply but didn't answer. Another board member spoke. We were told the vote was handled electronically, but I never saw a confirmation, not once. Someone else chimed in. We've been signing rules she wrote without oversight. The subtle unraveling was turning into a freefall. I opened the notebook again. Not just oversight, coercion, threats, manufactured violations, and cover-ups for your son. Darla snapped. My son did nothing wrong. I stepped closer. He beat my boy so violently he's in a coma. Her jaw locked, her eyes flickered, but she didn't deny it. The room shifted with tension so thick it felt like humidity. I laid the final page down, Jordan's recorded dates and times of every incident she'd buried. This is over. The tyrant in heels lunged forward, slamming her palm onto the table. You think you can walk in here and tear apart everything I built? No, I replied, unwavering. I think your lies tore themselves apart. Behind her, half the room stood. The remaining members looked shaken, uncertain, forced to confront the truth. The enforcer in crimson clung to her last shred of authority, but her mask was slipping fast. North cleared his throat as he surveyed the room. You all have a chance tonight, he said calmly. A chance to choose transparency, or to go down with her. The message wasn't hostile, just factual, and the board felt it. Darla's eyes blazed as she pointed at me. You're doing this because your family are snipers, I said, voice dropping to a razor's whisper. No, I'm doing this because my son deserves justice, and this community deserves freedom. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the woman from the front row spoke again, but this time with a trembling conviction. I motioned to suspend her authority pending legal review. Gasps broke out. Another voice followed. Seconded. The clipboard queen spun around, betrayed, horrified, desperate. You can't do this. I am this board. No, I said, stepping back as the final blow settled in. You were. And just like that, the foundation of her empire started to crumble, piece by piece, vote by vote. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tonight was the beginning. The next evening, the community center was overflowing, neighbors packed shoulder to shoulder, folding chairs scraping across the tile as people squeezed into every corner. Word had spread fast, too fast. By the time I arrived, the murmur of voices had turned into a low-throated vibration of outrage, fear, and something else simmering underneath. Hope. The HOA had never drawn this kind of crowd before. Not when the pool hours changed. Not when the landscaping fees doubled. Not when the officer of rules threatened half the street over mailbox height. But tonight, the people had shown up, and they were waiting for one person. I stepped inside and instantly felt hundreds of eyes snap toward me. Some nodded, some whispered, some looked at me like I was walking in with a torch to burn down a throne they'd been forced to bow to for years. At the front table sat Darla Whitlock, or what was left of her poise. The clipboard queen wasn't wearing her usual crimson blazer tonight, only a charcoal jacket that still couldn't hide the tremor in her hands. The enforcer in crimson had become a shadow of herself in just 24 hours. The tyrant in heels tried to steady her voice every time she spoke, but the microphone crackled with the shake she couldn't control. To her right, the remaining board members fidgeted like they were strapped into seats on a plane losing altitude. My brothers stood near the back wall, blending in with the crowd, but maintaining razor-sharp awareness. Not intimidating, just vigilant, just present. The room hushed when the moderator called, "We will now address serious allegations concerning HOA governance, leadership conduct, and resident safety." Darla shot to her feet so fast her chair toppled backward. "This entire spectacle is a smear campaign," she barked. "I have run this community with discipline, fairness, and integrity. These lies are backed by public records," I said, stepping forward. A ripple surged through the crowd like a wave hitting shoreline. Her glare cut through the room. "You don't have the right to speak." "I have every right," I countered, lifting the folder. "I'm a resident, a father, and the victim of your negligence." Gasps scattered across the crowd. I opened the folder and placed it on the podium. "These are the municipal filings for the HOA. Notice what's missing." A few people leaned closer, squinting. The room fell dead silent. "No certified vote," I said. "No verification, no member authorization. The board was never lawfully elected." A woman in the second row covered her mouth. A man whispered, "I knew something felt off." Darla's voice cracked. "Those documents were handled by you," I interrupted. "The board chair, the very person who should have ensured transparency." The officer of rules shifted uneasily. Another board member dropped his gaze. "And there's more," I continued. "Jordan, your own operations supervisor, kept detailed notes you never expected anyone to see." The crowd buzzed again, louder this time. Darla snapped, "Jordan is a disgruntled employee. He's right here," I said. Jordan stepped forward slowly, shoulders shaking, but eyes determined. Every step he took was an act of rebellion against years of intimidation. I saw everything," he said, voice cracking. "She hid reports, she threatened staff, she changed violations, after residents refused to bow to her, and she covered for her son, more than once." The room ignited with furious whispers. One neighbor shouted, "My daughter got fined because her bike was on the grass for 3 minutes. Another yelled, "She threatened to tow my car while her own rules were forged." Darla's face drained of color. "You all are being manipulated." "No," I said, stepping closer. "We've been controlled." Then I lifted the final page, Jordan's note from the day Mason was attacked. "He reported complaints about your son's violent behavior. You ignored everyone." Someone gasped softly. Another cursed under their breath. A few people cried. The crowd wasn't murmuring anymore. They were boiling. A board member stood shakily. I moved to remove Darla Whitlock from her position effective immediately, pending full legal investigation. "Seconded," someone shouted. "Third," another cried. The tyrant in heels spun toward her allies, betrayed. "You owe me loyalty. I built this neighborhood. I kept order." "No," a woman near the aisle said firmly. "You kept us afraid." The vote was unanimous. Every hand raised. Every voice confirmed it. Darla Whitlock's reign ended right there, in front of the community she'd ruled through intimidation and lies. As security escorted her out, she screamed threats that no longer held any power. The clipboard queen had fallen, and tomorrow justice would begin. The morning after the vote felt unreal, quiet in a way the neighborhood hadn't experienced in years. No aggressive emails, no threat-filled notifications, no early morning patrols by the officer of rules. Just stillness. A kind of peace that came only when fear had finally been uprooted. But peace didn't mean it was over. Justice hadn't caught up to Darla Whitlock yet, not fully, and until it did, I wasn't letting my guard down. I pulled into the hospital parking lot, just as the sun scraped across the horizon, casting long gold streaks over the asphalt where everything had begun. The same parking lot where her son attacked mine. The same pavement where Mason's head struck the curb before everything went dark. My chest tightened as I stepped inside, past the sliding doors and down the hall toward his room. When I entered, I froze. Mason's fingers twitched, not much, not more than a faint little movement, barely visible, but real. My breath hitched. "Buddy, I'm here." His eyelids stayed closed, but his hand curled a little more around my thumb. For the first time in days, a spark flickered inside my chest. Hope. Raw. Fragile. But alive. I sank into the chair, head lowered. You keep fighting, okay? You're stronger than anything that clipboard queen threw our way. The door creaked open. Jordan stepped in, eyes red but clear. I heard the news, he whispered, about the vote. She's out, I said. The board chair fell. He nodded slowly. Then something unsure flickered in his expression. Do you think she'll face real consequences? She will, I told him. She won't hide behind paperwork or fear anymore. Not after last night. Jordan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. I'm sorry, he murmured, for staying quiet as long as I did. I shook my head. You spoke when it mattered most. You helped free this neighborhood. A nurse knocked gently and stepped inside. Mr. Lawson, his numbers look stronger today. That movement is a good sign. I swallowed hard. Thank you. She adjusted a monitor and smiled softly. You stay hopeful. Kids are tougher than we think. When she left, I brushed Mason's hair back, voice barely above a whisper. Your uncle shook up half the HOA last night. You would have laughed. A phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from North. Delivered full file to investigators. She'll be charged. Another from East. Board requests you attend rebuild meeting tonight. They want you advising. And the last from Ridge. She's trying to flee town. Won't get far. I stared at the messages, absorbing each one like a weight lifting off my shoulders. The tyrant in heels could scream. She could deny. She could twist every excuse she had left. But she couldn't outrun what was coming. I stood and walked to the window, watching the sunrise pull color back into the world. Mason, I whispered, I swear to you, nothing like this will ever happen again. That evening, I returned to the community center, this time filled with relief instead of tension. Neighbors waved as I entered. Some clapped, some hugged me, some simply said, thank you. For the first time, no fear lingered in their faces. At the front stood the remaining board members, humbled, cautious, but ready to rebuild. The officer of rules was gone, the enforcer in crimson had resigned, and the clipboard queen herself was already facing questioning at the precinct downtown. I stepped up to the podium. This community deserves better, I said, and I'm not here to lead it, I'm here to help it rise. Applause filled the room. We'll elect a legitimate board, someone said. We'll rewrite the rules, another added. And protect our kids, a mother whispered tearfully. I nodded. Yes, starting now. A single figure stood near the back, Jordan, his posture straighter than before, the weight gone from his shoulders. When our eyes met, he nodded once, a promise that he'd never stay silent again. As the meeting wrapped, I stepped outside. The night air was cool, gentle, calm. For once, no footsteps approached with threat. No angry voice demanded authority. No red blazer appeared around the corner. Just peace. And as I looked toward the hospital in the distance, knowing my son was fighting his way back, I felt something settle inside me, something fierce, unbreakable. Justice didn't come from rage or force. It came from truth, from courage, from standing up when everyone else stayed quiet. And if you've ever fought back against someone who abused their power, someone who tried to silence you, then you already know what that victory feels like. Tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now and share your story in the comments.